This is what we're about to play you here is actually quite extraordinary, and you probably have only seen this story in on social media, but it feeds into the whole kind of race baiting, Black Lives Matter story, where the story goes next, what people are looking for, what they want. So this is the leader of Oxford Black Lives Matter movement. I think we should distinguish that is Oxford the place, isn't it, as distinct from the university? I would like to think so, bearing in mind what you're about to hear. So the leader of the Oxford Black Lives Matter movement has faced significant criticism after footage of her speaking at a protest has been shared widely online. In the video, Sasha Johnson is heard calling for a black militia, as well as comparing the police to the KKK. Have a listen.
I ain't scared of no terrorist group. The police is no different from the KKK. They stand around and protect statues and buildings instead of people. They need to join the local council and start to litter pick too. When I say if they have a pepper spray, we have our own too. They have smokes, we have it too. Come together, put your fist in the air. Black power! We need our own political party because we have David Lammy, it's tokenistic. We have Sadiq Khan, it's tokenistic. Priti Patel, tokenistic.
Yeah. And it goes on. It gets a little bit salty because there's some words like F the police that we obviously cannot broadcast. But you get the general idea. And I was watching this thinking, where does this woman think she is, for goodness sake? The police are like the KKK. There is literally no evidence for this. Where does that come from? And we've asked this question. We've left this alone for a few weeks now, but we have previously asked the question about the politics of these situations and of the extremities. And I think what you saw there was very much almost an honest interpretation of what many in Black Lives Matter are looking for. It was interesting that a former SAS soldier might lose his job because he called Black Lives Matter scum. Now, when you hear what you've just heard, this woman goes on to she's talking about meeting violence with violence in the streets. That's what she's discussing. And depending on what kind of street parlance or terminology you subscribe to, I mean, there's things in what she says that should worry people. It's just interesting that looking at social media, the response that she got to that, and believe me, she did get some stick for this. Look, that's her. If that's her opinion, I don't know where the anger comes from, where that level of anger comes from. She sounds educated in a fashion. Where does that anger come? Where does that belief come from? Let's speak with Dominique Samuels, president of the Orthodox Conservatives group. Dominic, try and shine some light on this if you can. From a black perspective, you're a black woman, you're listening to Sasha Johnson talking, she's a black woman. Do you identify with any of the issues she raised?
No, not at all. I think there's a pattern that we see with these kinds of people. They're like modern day revolutionaries, and 99% of the time, these kinds of people come from nice homes, nice families, are well educated. I think I saw one story about a Black Lives Matter leader who was actually educated at Oxford and kind of mimicking this American Black Panther Party extremist rhetoric. And I think comparing the police to the KKK, I think is incredibly insulting to the amount of Black people who were victims to the KKK, to the group of young Black girls who were blown up inside of a church because of the KKK, and all of the things that Black people have been through in America because of the KKK. I think it's quite frankly insulting. And this is the problem. We seem to want to equate issues that were most prevalent during the 50s and 60s and during the run-up to the civil rights era to the kinds of issues that Black people have now. And I've always said in the UK, inequalities are much more defined by class than they are race. And when you actually look at the figures and the statistics, only one Black person died in police custody last year. And that's just a fact. So if there was this kind of KKK-esque
this sort of systemic murdering and beating up that's happening on an hourly basis. I mean, we did have somebody on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she said that the police regularly beat up young Black kids. It's simply not true. But there is, as you're aware, Dominique, and you've talked a lot about this, and I see your stuff on social media commenting on this. There seems to be, looking at Sasha Johnson here, I agree. I think she's probably quite educated. She certainly, the one thing I'm not going to take away, she sounds educated. She can string a sentence together, that's for sure. And so there's something almost poetic, I'm saying that not as a compliment, in her words. But I'm wondering who she's at. Why is she at war? Where do you think, where can you imagine she sees this invisible enemy?
The invisible enemy is obviously the police and white people. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of these people are just disgruntled, bored teenagers looking for a cause and looking for something to rebel against. I'm not going to lie. At one point, I was actually similar to Sasha when I was younger in college. And I was kind of being exposed to this left-wing narrative of it's white people that are the sole problem affecting Black people in British society. And I think as she grows up a bit, maybe she will realise that referring to David Lammy, who has been perhaps the most vocal person in politics when it comes to Black issues, maybe even overstated at a lot of points that I've actually disagreed with. To call him a token, I think that's just a big indication of what these people are. And at the end of the day, they are Marxist extremists looking for a cause, and they're trying to find that cause within the UK and often making problems that quite frankly don't exist.
Do they matter? These people, we could say, well, in a couple of months' time, we won't remember who dear old Sasha is, and her videos won't be getting the same sort of interest. Does it matter what she's saying? Is she relevant, or will it go away?
I think it does matter, because I think that this kind of attitude towards the police within wider society is reflective of the kind of narrative that's being imposed on young Black people. And this narrative is that the police are inherently against Black people. Yep. They inherently go out of their way to persecute Black people. And you know what? In certain communities, there might be an issue with over-policing, but a lot of the time that is because there are high levels of crime within predominantly Black communities. I think that's just a fact. So we can have a conversation about that. But I think the conversation is erring towards being explicitly anti-police and hostile towards the police, when at the end of the day, without the police, there is no order. And without order, there is chaos. But that's exactly the kind of thing that these people want. So I'm not really surprised.
Yeah. Dominique, always good to talk. Thank you. Dominique Samuels, president of the the Orthodox conservative group. Reference the Oxford Black Lives Matter movement. This was, I'll play this to you again. Just tell me, I'm just intrigued. Every now and again, something happens in a news story, and you take a side on the news story, and you say, well, okay, this is where I stand on this. This is my belief, but people over there have a different belief. But although I disagree with them, I can kind of understand how they think that, or why they think that. So they might be bonkers, but I know why they're bonkers. It kind of or I might just have such a different view that I cannot recognize their view, but I respect the fact that that is, this is democracy and stuff. And then you see something like this and you think, I have literally no idea where such volatile, inflammatory, race-baiting guff could come out of the mouth of what I have to believe is an educated woman. Have another listen again to the head of Oxford Black Lives Matter movement, Sasha Johnson. You better be sitting down.
I ain't scared of no terrorist group. The police is no different from the KKK. They stand around and protect statues and buildings instead of people. They need to join the local council and start to litter pick too. When I say if they have a pepper spray, we have our own too. They have smokes, we have it too. Come together, put your fist in the air. Black power! We need our own political party, because we have David Lammy, is tokenistic. We have Sadiq Khan, is tokenistic. Priti Patel, tokenistic.
There it is. That is utterly bonkers, and I would happily just write it off as, have you seen this woman? She's nuts. She's just making stuff up about the KKK and a perceived problem, which she has pretty much invented. And I look at this and That should be it, really. You could write it off like that. But then I read the comments. I know it's the make-believe world of social media. And there is a kind of support there. And I think, as Dominique Samuel said a second ago, there are young kids. If you were 16 and a bit impressionable and a bit left-wing and a bit angry, which are the dispositions of anyone of that age ordinarily, then you'd listen to that and this woman could be your hero. She is comparing in the street in this country the British police to the KKK. She described them as a terrorist organisation. This would just be written off as stark raving mad, utterly bonkers, if it wasn't so dangerous. People like this woman she is the problem. The problem she purports to want to address or solve, she is part of. In fact, I would argue that kind of line of thinking, that sort of thought, she doesn't really want to solve the problem because she needs to retain the anger. I actually saw another video of her quite recently having an argument with, so there's her, and she's having an argument with a black guy. She calls him the C word during, not that one, the racial slur, that one, during this argument a couple of times. Did you see that, Ricky? Yeah. And I don't think I've ever seen somebody look so permanently angry. She absolutely looks livid. But, and this is the power maybe, but mostly through fairly calm, fluent speaking. She doesn't stumble. So therefore there is something sort of mesmeric about her to some people. So I don't imagine somebody like her wants anything solved, because you need to be in a permanent state of angst. You need to have a permanent battle. It's left-wing thinking does this. It's precisely what it feeds off. There has to always be an enemy. You have to constantly keep up the battle. And when one battle is perceived to be solved, then you just invent another one. And you find small examples and you make them bigger, and you exaggerate it and make it sound like it's the norm. And it's claptrap. It's high-octane hogwash. But it does sell to a certain gallery. She's dangerous, I'm telling you now. That is dangerous.